Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar that we have entitled Building a Career as a Fractional Leader. My name is Jeff. This is Josh. We are co-founders of a company called YOKE that finds places and supports fractional leaders who believe in the model. And we're just going to share a little bit of our story today. How we'll structure the time is I will go through this deck, and then it's a small enough room that we can get to know each other afterwards and connect and listen and hear each other's stories and experiences as well. So we are recording. Hopefully that's okay. So you never know what AI will do with it these days, but just wanted to inform you of that. All right, well, I'm going to get started, and I'll share a little bit of just my own story here. So here's the tension I was facing. This is the summer of 2023. So I had exited my role as a founder of an organization, and I had navigated all of the emotions of an exit. It was sort of anxious, should I do it? Then there was a decision point, then I had relief, and then I got all this praise, people saying, great job, you did your thing. And then I had this weird phase of becoming a lame duck CEO is what I call it. And then I kind of hit this position, a wall. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And I went through a period of a handful of months too, where I just failed to launch. I wasn't quite sure what was right for me in the next season of my career. Then I finally moved into like this readjustment and acceptance. And it was then like a time to search for my next endeavor. I had exited leading a nonprofit, so my exit was very humble from a liquidity standpoint. But I wanted to be, I was competent to be a CEO again, but honestly, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to be a CEO again and carry the load after kind of a big season of leadership. I looked into acquiring a business, but the debt load and the pressure to hit those targets didn't sound that appealing. And I could build again from scratch, but I actually wasn't sure I wanted to go it alone. I kind of was thinking, I would rather be on a team. And so here was the core tension I was facing in that 2023. I was looking for the right combination of flexibility, income, and mission. And so as we launched this webinar, I wanted to actually first talk about each of those briefly, and I'll share a little bit autobiographically. So the flexibility part, so I'm a father of 4 girls, so 10, 12, 15, and 17, me and the Haanen girls, all still are at home at my house. And so being a good present father is one of my highest priorities in life. Yet when I was looking at so many different roles that required me to travel, keep me far from family, anything that would restrict my ability to say yes to a soccer practice or taking a kid out for lunch one day, I just wasn't interested in it. Time was my most important asset. And I was really happy to build somebody else's venture, but I couldn't commit to, I'm just going to give you 45 hours of every week. I really wanted this flexibility to, yes, build, but I needed some control over my schedule. So that was the first sort of tension point that I was feeling. The second was income. As I said, I'm the father of 4 girls. So that means club sports fees and grocery bills and outrageous energy bills for all those long showers, right? So I needed to earn a professional income. I wanted to earn a professional income that support my family's needs and allow me to save for the future. But a lot of the corporate jobs we're looking at would really just have cut off my ability to say yes to my kids on a weekly basis, would have put me in a plane more. And some of the things that I was seeing with some of the consulting revenue was just highly inconsistent. But because my mortgage is quite consistent, my Costco bill is actually quite consistent, which is probably only second to my mortgage in terms of our bills. What I was looking for income is a professional income, but recurring, and I wanted that coming in. And this is the third thing that I was thinking through in this time, the spring of 2023, was mission. Here's what I mean by that. I couldn't bear the thought of just taking a job for the money. Do I need money? Of course. But I spent a career living out my calling and building a cause and organization that I deeply cared about. And so I really wanted some say-so over the ventures that I worked on. Because I had worked in the civic sector, but I really wanted to know that my life was making a positive impact on others. And there's an author, I'll read you a quick quote, but an author that I really like, Dorothy Sayers, she said that work should not primarily be the thing that one does to live, but the thing that one lives to do. It is or should be the full expression of a worker's faculty, the thing in which he finds spiritual, mental, and bodily satisfaction in the medium in which he offers himself to God. So when I think about mission, I thought like, I want to build ventures and businesses and organizations that are making a positive impact. So like, what is the right combination of those three things in this next season of life, which was important to me: flexibility, income, and mission. And I found that like fractional leadership was a really good fit for me. So we call fractional leaders at Yoke co-builders, some of the language that we're using, but it was the solution that I was looking for. And I think it's a really great way to build a career. So I want to go over what I found to be some of the benefits of becoming a fractional leader. So let's actually start at what I was just talking about, that time and flexibility. So, okay, here's what I did. So I went to a handful of CEOs and I said, I think I can help you build that, but here are some of the constraints. I'll only give you about 1 to 2 days a week of my time. And I gave them a time range, not an hour commitment, because what I wanted to offer to them was not just my time, but the pathway to an outcome. Like, time mattered less than how are we going to actually go and build that vision together. And I have experienced leading teams and overseeing and building processes and getting results. And so that's what I offered. And these three clients, each of them said yes to me in about a month. And I was a 1099 contractor. So I was accountable for deliverables and for outcomes, but not for hours. And so what happened here, this fractional leadership role allowed me to have a full plate of work, but I could still have the flexibility I needed and I wanted to for my life and my family. So I also think, like, in our culture, many people are prioritizing this of like, I need flexibility and I still want to do good work. So fractional leadership absolutely did scratch that itch for me. The second was like a consistent professional income. So between these three fractional clients, I found I was making more money than I ever had before. And I had the time and flexibility that working a big W-2 corporate job would not have necessarily given me. And that monthly income was consistent. It wasn't just project-based, it would be gone in 6 weeks after I did the thing. I was actually on the leadership team, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And I was ended up making about what senior managers in corporate America make, but I still had some of that flexibility, which was just super, super important to me as a husband and as a father. And then working on mission first ventures. This is what I mean on this. When I sat down with each CEO, here's what I was. So just my story was small business. There was a client for a church and one was at a university. So I was between the business world and the civic world. And my internal dialogue was something like this: I love what you're doing. I can totally help you build that, but there's no way you can afford me. So I didn't say that out loud, but that is what I was thinking. But here's what fractional leadership did. It opened the way. I could still lead, I could still build and guide these teams, but they didn't need me full time. And actually, I thought in retrospect, full time might have been somewhat problematic. I probably would have run faster and harder than it would have been healthy, either for the team that I was joining or maybe even for me personally. So it did give me some flexibility about working on a kind of mission first ventures, is what I say. And again, for me, it was both civic world as well as business world. A few other things, though, that I found after now doing this work for a handful of years of building a career as a fractional leader, there were some like fun and interesting unforeseen benefits to it. So one, which maybe I could have seen this, but the camaraderie of a team, rather than sort of being an individual advisor, I was on a team. Like, I enjoy being on teams. I enjoy working with somebody and going, as we have this name, yoke, being yoked alongside others and building something powerful and good. I just wanted to be on that. I just found that being on a team again after having exited my thing was great, and it was a good, it was just a really, really good fit. Second thing that I found was really de-risking my sources of income. So if you think of an investment portfolio, you generally wouldn't put all of your investments into a single investment. You would diversify. You have a diversified portfolio. So when we think about doing this with our careers or with our work, it, it was transformational. So I was paid monthly by my clients, like any employee, but as a 1099, so I was on the leadership team. But because not 100% of my income came from any one employer, I felt tremendously more comfortable in the leadership room and with management presence. So if I lost one or if I said something that was a little too honest, I would be okay financially. Like, I could readjust, take my time to find one new client, still cover my bills. And this led to another thing that I found was just great, at least for me personally, was improved management presence. So because I had these more diversified sources of income, I felt far more open to be honest, and like in a good way, I promise. And on each team that I was leading, it's just what they needed. So oftentimes I think that advisors and consultants, they don't have enough insider knowledge to speak truthfully to the CEOs and their teams. They just don't know exactly what's happening on a day-to-day basis. But here I was on these teams taking real responsibilities for outcomes. And in this case, I could say what needed to be said in a leadership team meeting. So this is what was kind of a curious result of this for me, this management presence, when I was less concerned about losing a client, it made me more honest. And here was something almost paradoxical. It made me much more valuable to the CEO and more valuable to the business. So if I said, for instance, to a CEO, hey, this sales process is a disaster, or hey, I think you and your senior VP need to really work through some trust issues, I wasn't throwing stones. I'm an insider. I'm committed to solving this problem alongside you. Let's go and build this together. I was a much better manager kind of in this role because I had this unique combination of the knowledge of an insider, but I had the objectivity of an outsider. So I could have really helped to be just a better manager, and just speak the truth in a way that I think my clients needed. So that's another one. And then this other one is just professional growth. As I shared, I was working across different industries, but this is what I think fractional leadership does for a lot of folks, is it increases your range. Like, I think the challenge with our careers oftentimes is that we can become very highly paid technicians where we're good at a very narrow skill set that somebody will pay for, and we get a little bit stuck in that until something changes, like, a large disruptive technology that's sweeping through our culture right now. So I worked across three very different industries, used my core skill set doing so. But because those were such different industries and the leadership teams were all different, I find myself growing professionally in some like really, really beautiful ways. So those were a handful of just benefits that I found to the fractional leadership structure. So here's a point I wanted to make on this webinar is what's good for the leader is good for the business. This is kind of obvious, but I did want to now switch the frame a little bit, thinking, okay, this was good for me as somebody coming into a company, but is this good for the business as well? Like, did this benefit them as I hoped it would, as I've done this work now for several years? And my answer to that is yes, absolutely. It's been very beneficial. So I'm gonna give you 5 reasons why I think this is actually really good for the business as well. So here's my first point. Owners just need somebody to do it. So as I sat and listened to owners beginning sort of what would be my fractional leadership journey, it became clear to me that they just didn't want my advice. They wanted me to go and build what they had envisioned. So for 2 owners, they had a vision, but they didn't really know the how-to of how to turn that vision into a strategy and then into core operations and kind of make the system work. And I did have that experience. And then for my third client, a little bit different, but he just had too much on his plate. He just needed another leader around to think and strategize, prioritize, and then just take significant projects off of his plate so that he had a little bit more leadership capacity as well. Fractional leadership, it says to an owner, let's go build this together rather than, here's what you really ought to do. And I found this sort of me showing up and saying, we could go do that together was like a game changer. It wasn't just, a lot of CEOs have lots of visions, but how do we actually go build it? Like, how do we become co-builders? Me showing up to say this, to say we could do it together, game changer. Here's the second one. Owners are cash strapped and they need leadership talent at entry-level management costs. This is probably not a shocker, at least for the small business land that I'm generally in, but cash is tight. Always it's tight. And oftentimes that cash will go toward entry-level roles. But what they needed, that I found, was leaders. So none of them could afford me full time, but the solution ended up being this fractional leadership. So I gave them access to me as a leader on their team. It was about the monthly cost for them as an entry-level manager in their industry. It was a great deal for them. They could now delegate a big leadership initiative or a large project to a leader without even them knowing the best next steps. I could go figure out the next steps. And so I would do that for them at just a good deal, a relatively good deal compared to what they could generally get in the market. Here's my third point. Owners need long-term steady support to achieve goals. I don't know how much you guys have been in the entrepreneurial space. And not everybody will agree with me on this one, which is okay. But my 2 cents is that most ventures don't need to speed and scale. Most don't. To grow in a healthy way, they need good, consistent leadership over time to figure it out. To figure out, say, product market fit, to manage a team, to build trust with clients. With fractional leadership, I would say, look, I'm going to be around here in 6 months, in a year. We have the time to figure out what's the right model. How do we build momentum? How do we overcome challenges? How do we grow together? And the results in my case, they were great over 3 years. Amazing, strong, incremental growth. None of them were rocket ship, we're the new Anthropic kind of things. But it was never a part of our goal. They were all built on really healthy organic growth. So I think that one, the long, steady support to achieve their goals was just really helpful. And then also, this is another one. What was the benefit to the business? Oftentimes I found they don't just need to delegate tasks, they need to delegate problems. And here's what I mean by this. If you know a workflow that can be automated, you can probably have an AI agent do it. Okay. If you have a clear list of tasks that maybe are somewhat unconnected, you could potentially hire a virtual assistant to do that. But if you have a vague vision, way too much on your plate, you don't know what to do, lack of clarity about the future, feeling overwhelmed, you just need to sort of delegate it to a leader that you hope will bring about clarity and strategy to do that. And that actually happened with all 3 of my clients. I would just say to them, don't worry, I'll take that and figure that out. It was a tremendous relief to the leaders that I had the chance to come onto their team and help them co-build with. So I think that was a huge benefit to businesses. And then owners need flexible hiring solutions. I've been a CEO. I know the weight of hiring leadership roles that are not only expensive as W2 employees, but I know like the weight of my performance and my company's performance will determine their salary and their kids' sports fees and groceries, all of that. Like it can be a heavy thing. And CEOs don't know the future, but what fractional leadership provides, it provides, rather than sort of just an on-off to an on-off button to a very large decision, it's kind of more of like a lever where you can scale up or scale down as the future demands. So fractional leadership, it solves this key problem for owners that you hire what you need and when you need it. And then you can take a look every 6 months, 12 months, what's the best next step for this person? And it's a much easier conversation with me to say, hey, Jeff, I need less, or hey, Jeff, I need more. So, and actually to that point, I wanted to have a couple of little points here of navigational hazards of becoming a co-builder. Here's a few things. I'm interested to hear you guys' experiences of this in a minute too, but a few little tips that I've learned along the way. So I'm just gonna give you 5. So the full-time question. So here's the first. All of my clients have tried to hire me full-time. Actually, at the church, I counted 7 times. You should be our CEO. You should do this. And honestly, I was flattered. Thank you. You think I'm wonderful. That's very kind of you. But for the reasons I listed above, I just respectfully declined. I had to communicate to them that staying fractional didn't mean I was any less committed to their venture. Like, again, I'm a dad with 4 kids. It doesn't mean I only have enough love for 1 kid. I can actually share a little bit of that. But I actually had to communicate like my care for them, my commitment to the vision and the team, while maintaining some of these time boundaries, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second. But I think that's a conversation that, especially the really good fractional leaders, we don't necessarily mean fractional leadership at YOKE is the thing you do for 2 months until you go full time. We actually think it can be a nice way to build a career, even though the full-time question I'm sure will pop up for many of you. Second is jobs change. So as businesses scale, your job is going to change. As a fractional leader, that's fine. So what you need to do is you need to replace yourself and level up, move from project management out of one management role to another. You need to continually just cultivate a range of skills. So if, for example, you're good at numbers and you're a fractional CFO, can you actually grow into a significant manager role where all of IT and HR and admin and accounting report to you? Or if you've been an operations manager, can you develop this like relationship first sales skill set to help build out a sales team? I do think businesses are constantly dynamic, and your role as a fractional leader will change. The more range you have, the more opportunity will be for you to actually move into different roles in the organization without needing to switch clients. A third navigational hazard is time limits. So you need to set limits on your time, and you have to use time well. Fractional leaders need to block their time off quite well. And Josh and I have a little bit of a different way of doing this. I'll let Josh, you share about that in a second. But this has another, I think, unforeseen benefit. When I had to be more careful with my time and how to use my time, it forced me to decide on what I could do and couldn't do in any given week. And it forced my hand on another skill, which is delegation. So oftentimes I found that because I was in this fractional position, what could happen is I would get pushed down the organization. And what do I mean by that? Being pushed down is ended up doing work that's more entry level in nature. But one of the things I regularly did as I got better at delegation, I would say, hey, I'm a manager and a leader on this team. These are the things that I should be doing: management, presence, strategy, vision, working with teams, right? That's what I should be doing. Here is actually what we ought to either delegate down to an entry-level employee in our organization, or we should just hire a contractor to do for way cheaper than my time. So that delegation piece ended up actually being really good for the organization, and it kept me at a higher level. And it forced me to say, okay, what's wise? How do I actually continually lead well? And then what do I delegate beneath me? And then here's kind of one of the last navigational hazards I'll talk about today is complexity between clients. So switching between different sort of social worlds, for me, a university, a church, a small business, definitely can be challenging. So one of the things that I've had to master and get better at, I'm not fully there, but is what I call context switching. So context switching is the ability to cognitively switch between different types of either tasks or environments. And each of the environments that I've been a fractional leader in have been very different. And so how I've managed this is I'll take client calls any day of the week, but I block full days or half days to work on specific tasks for my clients. And I'm interested to hear how some of you guys work on this as well. And we do some of this training with our co-builders. But suffice it to say, great co-builders, they have to switch between different environments and understand where were the conversations and the emotions in this room last time I left it, even though it was very different from maybe what I was doing that morning, and then manage your time and your priorities with excellence. Okay, co-building isn't for everyone. Couple of quick thoughts here. Here's people that I don't think will be good co-builders or fractional leaders. The unmotivated. So I think for the people that I've come across that are interested in this space but are just kind of looking for a cush role, I just don't think it's for you. If that's you, hopefully that's nobody here on this call. But I think for those that don't have an intrinsic desire to help owners build great things, being a co-builder won't fly because it's just too easy to take advantage of the time flexibility. You do actually have to have an intrinsic drive to say, let's go build something fun together. So I think that's a really important thing. I would also say the risk averse, there is some risk in this because the reality is you're managing a handful of high commitment clients, not a ton, you're not managing 20, but it could be 2, 3, maybe up to 4. And at the top of any company, though, you see risk. So here's my view: is being a co-builder more risky than a W-2, 100% like a stable income? Well, actually, I don't think there is anything such as a 100% stable income. There is some fluidity in being a co-builder. Some clients will come and some clients will go over time. But in my view, I would much rather be at the top of an organization and understand the risks involved with that. And even if I do lose one job, I might actually be able to shift to another part of the organization and just recognize that risk is everywhere. So in my view, it's better to see risk and to manage risk than to pretend that it doesn't exist. And then this is another kind of framework for those that are probably not going to be good co-builders, are they're just non-leaders. Like if we're just going to show up and ask like, what should I do here? That's not a co-builder. Our co-builder is going to continually find the right ways to connect vision, strategy, team, capital, operations, and build and scale great businesses. take the initiative and are self-driven. So there's a handful of thoughts there. Let me give a little bit of a quick summary of the big ideas. But so co-builders, I think they enjoy great time flexibility, consistent professional income, the chance to work on mission-driven ventures. And in this webinar, I gave a little bit of an overview to some of these unforeseen benefits like professional growth, and the camaraderie of a team, some of a de-risked income stream, and greater just managerial presence on teams. And then I think, honestly, the businesses that hire co-builders, they get bright, character-first, experienced leaders, that they execute their vision. They're stable and consistent over time. They can adopt and grow teams. They can solve problems. They can do so at the fraction of a cost. So I do think hiring or becoming a co-builder isn't right for every single situation in business, but for many, like for me, like in the spring of 2023, it was just a really, really good fit. So there's kind of my overview, my pitch on this webinar. Let's actually now bring it back over to you. Maybe Josh, if you actually want to take over here. Love to hear your questions either for me or for Josh. Josh, if you actually have any other kind of thoughts on this too and want to add on to this, and then I would love to hear you guys' experiences in this room of any of the stuff that I talked about today.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. No, I think you did a great job summarizing it. I think from my perspective, just for those that don't know me, my journey into this was very similar, right? I found myself making a transition and wanted something different, and this was a great option and a great opportunity. Again, to Jeff's point, definitely takes work, definitely takes effort, requires a lot from you, but still provides a lot of the flexibility. And for me, I've got 2 kids as well. Jeff's got 4. But very involved. I coach, I do some other things. So finding ways to find that flexibility that gave me not only the opportunity to continue to invest my skills, grow my skills, but also do those other things that really make me as a person feel whole, allow me to be present for my family, and then and quite frankly, have a healthier relationship with work than I have ever had in my entire career. And so those were all really important things for me, and those motivations look different for each person. But I think that's what brought me across this journey. So, as you guys are exploring, as you're looking at this, you all are at different points of your journey. I think some of you are actively doing this today. Others are sort of dipping the toe in the water and wanting to find out more. I'd love to just use this opportunity. One of our core tenets at YOKE is around community and building communities, giving people an opportunity to learn from one another. And so this is a great opportunity if you've got questions, not just to hear from Jeff or I, whether it's Tim or Mike or anybody else in the room who I think is actively doing this or done this in the past. I think this is a great opportunity just to sort of ask those questions and sort of see what people are doing. So I'll turn it over. You'll just need to unmute your mic if you do have a question. And then depending on engagement, I've got a couple of questions here that I can also jump into as needed.
I got a question just on, I'm kind of new to this, just getting started in fractional work. It seems to be very project based at the moment. And you kind of talked about how it's not so much project based, but longer term leadership opportunities. How do you kind of shift that, and what do you look for to find those roles?
Jeff, you want to start?
Yeah, I'd be happy. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you being on the call. Yeah, thanks for the question. I do think I actually started for the small business I was working in. It started with a project. It started with an owner needed to figure out supplier pricing, and we ran like this competitive bid between different suppliers to try to bring down some of our supplier costs. It started there. But then as I got to know him a little bit more, and I thought, hey, so here's where we started, but here's where I think the business needs to go. They may have put like a project-based beginning on me, and I actually think we can shift the conversation to starting to think about how are we going to build the future of the company. So practically on that, like fractional leadership, it can start on that, but it is much more, you're on the leadership team. You can potentially have direct reports if that, makes sense. And what's key is it's monthly and ongoing. Just like a leader in a company, has regular things. So if you own, say, communications or operations, you own sort of sales in that company, sort of for that fraction or that piece of the company, you can say, hey, I'll take ownership for this. So I do think that's a piece of a challenge. I think and Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think your leadership presence and saying, hey, let's actually switch this to I'll be a fractional leader on your team and I can sort of own this slice. I can care for an outcome rather than a project. I think that's the mentality shift, but happy to hear your thoughts on that, Josh.
Yeah, Michael, I would say a couple things jump out to me. One is, I think as you think about how you are entering the business, I think positioning yourself more from a outcomes oriented approach will set the groundwork and the foundation for you as you think about those future engagements. I will say, like Jeff, almost every single one of my engagements has started with a clearly defined project, because let's be honest, that's what most business owners are entering into. They have a very clear idea in their mind of what they need. They don't always necessarily have visibility into all of the other things that are connected. But what I have found is, as I position myself as whether it's a generalist or a specialist, whatever it may be in terms of your skill set, as you think about sort of not just honing yourself into that project, but sort of setting the broader picture from the beginning, what happens as you then start to walk through that project, you're just having those normal ongoing conversations. And now all of a sudden it's, hey, well, you can start to draw back and pull back on them, and it starts to open those doors. And so what I have seen is that 3-month, 90-day project that had very clear milestones and deliverables then transforms into like hey, well, what can we keep you around? Could you also help us with this? Could you do this as well? And then all of a sudden, the dynamic changes a little bit. But, what Jeff was saying, back at the beginning is around that discernment piece is really then, though, still making sure that you're working to define what is that sandbox that you are going to play in and help them with, so that you can establish that domain expertise, but also that ownership to really then partner alongside and go down. So that's been my experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also this could a little bit come down to billing as well. If you just at the end of the project say, here, I don't know, Michael, is it marketing or what's your background? Like what kind of fractional work are you doing?
Yeah, marketing.
Yeah. You just say, I can produce a website for you or whatever the project is, right? Or, marketing is highly complex in this digital age. I could just get you the outcomes that we're looking for. It's this much a month, and I'm on the team. You're in the leadership team calls. You're sort of in that. And so it could just be like a repitch too of saying, I'll just own marketing for you. And then you have people underneath you that are the subcontractors, for that as like a leader on the team.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, I'm still in the situation where I'm considering looking for a full-time job, but also considering this as another option. So I'm at the point where I need to make that decision. I thought about it for quite some time, but what is your recommendation around obtaining clients as far as, small business, medium business? Like what is the right group of companies that are open to this type of work? Small business means different things in different areas.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And Jeff, I'll let you weigh in here in a second. I think, Lisa, from my perspective, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer to that. I think a lot of it is going to depend on your area of domain and expertise, right? And so there is some level of exploring, the type of work that you do and understanding the types of companies that are in need of that. But fundamentally, I think the key is, and Jeff and I and I'll just be very candid, Jeff and I come from vastly different backgrounds in this work, right? So a lot of Jeff's experience is small business. So think 1 million to 10 million, 15 million, right? In terms of revenue. I, on the other hand, am coming at this from a 20 to $200 million revenue bucket, right? Much larger companies. And so the reality is that there are both. And what I will say, though, is that my recommendation is you always start with your existing network. Who do you have and who do you know? And who can you talk to that will allow you to just have conversations? Just building relationship with people, getting to know people and hearing what they need, and then connecting that to the work that you do. So my recommendation, start with your network, figure out who the businesses are inside of that network, and then start listening to what those needs are. And that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to have direct connections into the CEO. Maybe you have connections into, a director, or maybe you have even into a sort of a line level employee, but the person who's actually feeling the pain in the day to day of what you are working for and toward. And I think those are the things that then will allow you to sort of start to drive and have those conversations.
Yeah.
Jeff, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I would just add from and thanks for sharing. Yeah, Josh and I have such different backgrounds, which it's been fun, honestly, working with Josh on this. So I think when you show up and you're listening to the pain point of an owner, small business owner, what is that pain point? How can you solve it? That's kind of how I would start. I would say, generally speaking, people will either go from do a project for me or full time. You do oftentimes need to pitch. Hey, what if I did this for a day or two a week, and I'll just own this whole area of the organization for you, or in a larger company, I'll own this product development team. Like, you kind of have to pitch this in a way that really makes sense for what you want to do and meets their need at that. So I do think, Lisa, there's a little bit of sort of listening, and then it's sort of like a strategic pitch that says, you're the leader to go build that at the company, and this is how much time, and this is the general boundaries on that. So I do think it's a little bit of an art, but very doable. People do it. I would also say, one last comment. Generally speaking, fractional work, you see a lot of this in sort of venture private equity world, where things are scaling fast and you need executive leaders in different areas. I've done this work in civic organizations as well as a small business, and they do need you to sort of describe what this is. Lisa, so they may not have like a category for this. There is more of a category for fractional CFO, CMO for that, but sometimes though, they might mean project work by that, rather than I am actually leading this thing on your leadership team. So you may need to go and suggest, I'll be the leader, I'll just go build that for you. That's been my pitch. I'll go build that for you. And people generally like that pitch. So
yeah, and Lisa, I would just add, a very practical example that I actually just had with another client is, as I was walking through this process with them, they thought they had this idea of what they needed. They said, hey, I just need to go do this. We just need to hire this person to go do this. And as we started working down through the questions, and I started working through them on this other thing that we've been partnering with them on, what became clear is, sure, you could go do that. But do we have the answers to all these questions? And the answer to that was no. And so now all of a sudden, we don't know the answers to the questions that we're asking about what this role is going to do. Am I really in a position to now go and hire this person full time? And so what we actually decided was, hey, we're going to work in this framework. We're going to work together to build this. In the interim, I'm going to take care of leading this for you. And as we work toward this area, we will work it to a point where it's ready to be handed off. But when we hand it off, we're going to have a very clear understanding of what are the skills, what is the knowledge, what's the background, what's going to make this person successful, and quite candidly, make sure the business is in a position to absorb that person and not just hire somebody in, let them flail around, fail, and then be at a point where, well, that was a waste of money and time, and now we feel like we're at a starting point. So that's been something for me, even just very recently, where I've seen that and lived that in a very real way.
Thank you.
Great question.
Hey guys, I think you've shared enough about this that I could probably surmise your answer, but is there anything specifically you would speak to about how to get someone out of thinking that this is like a consultant role? So it's, again, that's not project where I think it's probably some of that same language around like, let me go build this for you versus let me just tell you what I think. Because I think it's pretty common, at least in some of the conversations I'm having or hearing about, that people just want to position this almost like consulting. And I think even myself, that was probably my temptation early on, is to think of consulting.
Yeah, it's a great question, Luke. So I think there's like a clear way to talk about that. One is a consultant says, here's what you should do. A
Right.
fractional leader says, I will go and do that.
Yeah.
like I am actually going to go build that thing for your company, you know? Yes, it costs more on a monthly, but I'm on the leadership team. I'm actually going to go own and build this particular slice. So that's how I'd position it from advisory or consulting, which oftentimes, again, it starts there. And sometimes actually it's just the right move. Somebody just doesn't know what they don't know, and you just need a consultant for 6 weeks, right? But it is more of like willing to take ownership over outcomes over a longer period of time that kind of people need to put that hat on, you know? And this, for all of my clients, this has been a relatively new framework, I think, that people are not, to your point, they're not necessarily used to this, you know? But if I say, I'll charge you as much as an entry level employee, but I'll go build that thing for you that doesn't exist and build all this sort of revenue or momentum or otherwise around it, it's a pretty good deal. It's a pretty good deal. So anyway, to answer that, I do think it's you do it, or do you want me to do it? And me do it doesn't necessarily mean I have a typo on here. Experiences. Sorry, I just noticed that right now. Terrible. But yeah, it's just a different framework, and I think people are responsive to it when they hear it for the first time, thinking, "Oh yeah, if I could have Luke on my team, I would totally want Luke on the team." And frankly, I think, I mean, these are people, like, they want you. And if you just say the boundary around me is flexibility, you know, like, I think people would be, honestly honored to have you. So
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Luke. I think the thing that has probably been the biggest lesson I've learned over the last year plus of doing this is the reality of, one, they don't know what they need necessarily or what they want at the beginning of it. And I don't necessarily know what the best solution for them is going into it. And so while I always walk in with the idea of, hey, fractional leadership may be the right way to go, to Jeff's point, sometimes it just turns into consultancy. I had an opportunity and it just happened to fit in well into my schedule. But going back to what Jeff was saying at the beginning, like, this is where the flexibility comes in as well, right? I still have the right to say no to something. If it turns out that all they want is this very short term, 2 or 3 week thing, it doesn't really match up with what I want to be able to do, I still possess that flexibility to be able to, like, this isn't the right thing for me, but hey, I actually know this person. I know Tim. This is right up Tim's alley. Why don't you connect with Tim? I think he would love to tackle this project for you, or Stephanie, or whomever, right? Depending on what that goes. And so it just gives you that flexibility to, again, really sort of hone in on the work that you want to do. And maybe you don't ever get this person past the idea of just being a consultant, and maybe that's not the type of relationship you want. So I think that's the other piece of this, of being clear on the type of work that you want to do, because it does allow you then to sort of really lean in and understand as you go through that discovery process.
is that helpful, Luke, or you thinking about it from a different angle? Happy to hear your ideas.
No, super helpful. That was part of what I would guess you would say. I'm just thinking about other kind of rabbit trails mentally, and it's funny. There's some of the stuff that I've been seeing like emerge is, instantaneous, like scope creep, even like before, you're fully on board. Like you said, like everyone, like, oh, I just want to hire you full time, or I just want all of your hours. So hearing you talk about the boundaries around that was helpful. I'm trying to imagine in my head, like, day 2 a week. Does that, I'm trying to help potential clients understand, like, well, how much access do you get to me, right? Do you get like unfettered access? Like, hey, reach out whenever you want. Or like, hey, there are these blocks of times that I'm working for you, and outside of that, I'm not working for you, so don't call me, right? I don't think that's the right answer. I think it's sort of like, hey, I'm part of the team, so of course I'm available to you. And then also just like personal scope creep. It's like another thing that I'm dealing with, where it's like, to your point, Joshua, like what I'm finding is like a lot of people don't really know what they don't know, and they don't know what they want. And so
Yeah.
I happen to be someone that can like talk about a lot of different things. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait, could you do that for us? And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, wait, can I do that for them? Like, should I say yes or no? Right. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I can help you figure out your website stuff. And I'm like, I think with ChatGPT and a lot of relationships, I can figure that out. But I'm like, should I be saying yes to that?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, two thoughts on that. So, like a website, say you're a CMO, should you do the website? Well, probably not. You should probably sub it out below you. you know?
Right.
Because if you're actually leading on the team, if you're on the leadership team, there's lots of people that can do amazing websites. And so any manager or leader in a company is going to have budget to do some things, right? And that's what I say is, here's what you're paying for me over here. Strategy, managerial presence, vision, relationships, all these other things. Here are the things that it's far cheaper to sub out below. And actually, and the benefit to them is you'll still oversee that. And so actually all of my clients, I've got all sorts of different subs doing different things at different places. So I think that's one. And then on the time blocking thing, I do have people say, you can call me whenever. But at the very beginning, I said, I'm generally going to give you this day a week. And that other day-ish time, it's flexible. And I need that because maybe a big project something happens on a Wednesday. I need to get that done on a Friday. And so I've sort of worked my schedule that way where I do have some expectations. Again, some are remote, some are sort of in person, but I do start with that expectation. But I will say, hey, I'll get to that unless, this is an ER room, fractional, executive client. Like, I'll get to that when I get to that, and I prioritize my time well. But it does really require that sort of, what kind of work should leaders be doing boundary, and then time boundary. Otherwise, too much context switching is actually cognitively very tired. I find, yeah.
Yeah, and what I will say, just very practically to add to that, Luke, and this is one of the areas where Jeff and I differ, right? So Jeff time blocks by client, I time block by task. So for me, context switching wise, it's a lot more difficult for me to switch from going from leadership work to project management work to, some sort of strategy work. That, as long as I'm in the strategy world, I can jump from client 1 to client 2 to client 3. But if I'm coming out of project management work into strategy work, that takes me a lot of time to sort of like reorient my thinking. And so for me, it's not uncommon to have like a 2-hour block where I'm bouncing from across 3 different clients and doing the same type of work all at one time, just because that's where my brain's at and that's how I function. The other thing I would say is, to Jeff's point about subcontracting out, the other thing that my experience has told me is that subcontracting out of work doesn't mean always that you're even taking a hit on your margin in terms of your fee. So don't assume that just because you want to subcontract out work that the client wouldn't be willing to pay for that. Perfect example, I'm working on a transformation project right now in a leadership capacity at a client, and they've hired me to do a lot of the core work around that. And now we're in execution phase, and they're like, okay, well, now we're ready to do this. I said, that's great, guys. You don't want to pay me to do that work, right? And so we're going to go out and we're going to find a project manager for 75 to 150 bucks an hour or whatever it might be, who's going to be somebody that's going to come in and do this. And so for an extra couple grand a month, we're going to have a dedicated person that's going to run this, that's going to do that. Now, different clients will have different needs or abilities. This one just happens to be a little bit larger, that, that's not going to be a problem for them to bring in a 10 to 15 hour a week project manager to help with this project. But so don't assume that just because there's additional work to be done, that there aren't other ways or people that you could find to help execute on that work as well.
Yeah. Stay in a leadership capacity. Don't get pushed down. You push the work down. Yeah. Anybody else, just thoughts or questions or total disagreements? Probably with my spelling in number 2. If you disagree with that, that's okay.
I had a question. I was connecting with another fractional marketer, and he was talking about what he's seen in the last several years. He's been doing this, is that at about the 6-month mark, your value within the organization starts to go down. The scope of the project or whatever, but they start to see like, okay, I don't think we're ready to like go on our own. How do you guys manage that? Is that something you guys see, or is it go find the next thing to help them with to keep that value going? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would say I've had fewer that have gone shorter periods in 6 months than others. So almost all of mine, I'm at 10 plus months at this point. But I think that's where it goes back to what Jeff was talking about from a leadership capacity. And I'm not trying to diminish the work that anybody else, that this individual you're talking to is doing, but what I have found is by offering and taking more of that leadership approach and thinking about it from a strategic perspective and thinking about that next step of where we go, has really been the thing that sort of kept me around. And I've been in organizations now where I started in one group. I have now skipped across 5 or 6 different groups and functions, because now I have the background, I have the understanding, I've got the cultural context, I know the people. There's just been this desire to sort of do it. Now, if as a fractional leader, I'm more of a generalist, so it's easy for me to do that, right? So I can stretch everything post-act, sort of revenue ops through, retention, collections, fraud. I've had experience doing all of that, so it's very easy for me to do. For those that are more specialized, there may come a time where, hey, they're ready to hire somebody, right? And then it becomes great. Well, you could do that, but from my perspective, I always think there's a great opportunity to think about it from a monetization perspective there as well. It's like, great, well, who do you know that might be a great fit for that role? And are there ways that you can continue to add value or continue to drive that value going forward? But Jeff, curious to your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. I think 2 things. One, think like an owner. Like as a leader in that company, you're thinking regularly like an owner is thinking about, well, for marketing, sales, you need people coming in your funnel, operations, you have to deliver with excellence, you need business infrastructure on the back end. But you're thinking like, how are we going to build this business together, of which marketing is a piece of that. I would also say language of we versus you. I've used that a lot. Like, this is us. This is our team. We're building this together. It really makes you seem much more as a critical member of a team, kind of longer term, of which you have a particular vertical. And as a member, you should be on leadership team calls. If you're not on leadership team calls, that's actually, or meetings or whatever, that's actually, I think, the place that you want to be, because you might opine on things over on the CFO side or on the finance side. You don't own it, but as like a member of that leadership team, you need to be on that. So to be fair, like I've either done work in small businesses, but I also done entrepreneurship where I created a program inside of a larger organization, and I created my own leadership structure inside of that. Yeah, I can give you more details on that, but those are all leadership conversations that we're having on a regular basis. So I think being on that leadership team, are you on that right now, Michael? Are you on like the leadership team, or are they just asking you to do more project-based things right now?
I just signed the client this morning that I'll be on the leadership team for that one. But
Great.
my other client, I'm not.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome,
and-
man. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That is.
Big
And
wins.
things can cycle in and out, but companies always need marketing. Like, so, like what is the people solution to own and lead that? I still think companies always have to have it. So.
Patrick, I think you were going to ask a question as well.
Yeah, thanks for this. This is super helpful to sort of understand the space a bit. You both talked about the value that you bring as generalists, and I'm curious how you position that when the client might see their need as sort of very functional. Like I have a marketing specific need or a sales need or supply chain. And how do you position yourself as the best person to solve that when they're saying, well, you're just a generalist, I could hire someone who's a functional expert in just this problem?
That's a good one. Great question. So I think that there's different answers to that. It depends on the business. For me, I always lead with my core area of expertise, right? So I have an area that I am really strong at, and that I love to operate in. And so I always start there. But then as I get in, what I typically find is the barriers that keep you and you're like, oh, you're just a generalist, start to degrade. And so the example I'll give you is I have a client right now who, when I went in, it was all about, they were scaling massively. Okay. So they were going from, when I joined them, there were about 200 employees. They're now over 800 employees. Okay. And that was over the course of a year. So that gives you an idea of how quickly they've been growing. So just massive growth. As we got in, the problems that needed solved were the same across multiple business lines. And the fact that I'm not an IT guy didn't matter, because I was the guy who knew and understood the problems that came along with the growth. And so it allowed me to sort of then begin to move around. So I think to your point, yes, you should always be truthful about where your skills are and what you're strong at, and use that as your opportunity to get into the businesses where there is a match. But beyond that, then you do have the ability, and you should, and I think for me, this is hard to remember, is I always tend to discredit my abilities a little bit and be like, oh, well, I just do this. When in reality, I do have skills that allow me to have an impact and influence across other areas, and then partner with the organization. And again, not doing it from a way of like I'm trying to generate income for myself, but truly because I'm interested in what's best for the business. If it's to go hire somebody else, let's go hire somebody else. Bring that person in. I will be the first person to tell them that. But there is also value that you can begin to drive by bringing in some of that clarity and doing some of that initial work. Awesome. Well, it looks like we're right about at time, and I know folks have got schedules, so appreciate it. I think the one just parting thing I'll leave for you guys is, some of you I think I've had a chance to talk to and meet with before. Others I haven't. If we haven't had a chance to connect, I'd love to connect and just chat more. I'm going to drop a link in here that is to our Become a Co-Builder. There's no commitment, but what that will do is at least get name, contact information. It'll make sure that I've got an opportunity to go in and reach out and connect with you. I'll also just drop in the email address that you can email there as well. But really appreciate you guys coming out. Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules. I know everybody's schedules are busy. And what I will say is, for both Jeff and I, please don't be a stranger. Feel free to email us if you have questions. We're happy to just connect, build relationships, community, do what we can to help support and find ways that we can encourage and walk alongside folks as they're in this journey. So appreciate everybody's time, and thanks again for coming out, and we hope you have a great rest of your day, guys.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Very grateful. Yeah, appreciate your time.